There's a difference between a child talking to themselves and a child having a conversation with someone you can't see. In the spring of 1877, in the quiet town of Watseka, Illinois, that line blurred end for one family. It never came back. Her name was Mary Lurancy Vennum, 12 years old. A soft-spoken girl with a wide smile and a habit of watching people a little too long before she spoke. She lived with her parents, Thomas and Lorinda, in a modest white farmhouse that sat crooked between two cornfields, the porch always sagging like it was exhaling. Mary had always been odd, not troubled, just strange. The kind of child who remembered things she shouldn't, who woke from naps crying over names no one recognized, who claimed more than once that her dreams weren't dreams, they were visits. Her mother chalked it up to fever dreams. But then Mary began speaking in full conversations with no one. But in January of that year, something changed. It started with silence. She stopped talking and, sitting on the floor with her back to the wall, staring down the dark corridor that led to the cellar, would sit by the window for hours, lips parted just slightly, eyes tracking something only she could see. Then the voices began. Then, she said, without turning to him, she says, the walls remember. Her voice deepened, thickened, and spat out words in no language her family recognized. At first, she whispered in her sleep guttural mutterings, low and rhythmic. One night, her brother found her in the hallway at 2-way. Her lips were moving. Who are you talking to? He asked. She blinked slowly, like she was pulling herself up from underwater. She looked up at the minister with black-rimmed eyes and whispered. She said, your wife is cold in the ground. Why do you still wear the ring? The next morning, Mary didn't recall any of it. By things got worse. The fits began once from under the bed while Mary was sleeping. She would fall limp, suddenly, like her strings had been cut then jolt up. Her body stiff and contorted, eyes rolling back so violently the whites turned red with burst vessels. They called doctors. Some said it was epilepsy. Others muttered about hysteria. One suggested an asylum. When her mother pressed her, she simply said, she says food won't help me where I'm going. But her parents were God-fearing people. They called a minister. That night, the family knelt in the parlor, candles flickering low, as the Reverend placed a hand on Mary's shoulder and began to pray. And Mary laughed, not a child's laugh a dry, throaty rattle that made the candle flames bend. Not yet. The minister left without finishing the prayer, and Mama hums when she cooks. This house is wrong. Then came the knocking. Names like Essa, Minerva, and Mary Roff. It started in the walls, 3 slow knocks, at exactly 3:15 a.m. every night. Sometimes from the floorboards, sometimes from inside the closet. I am here for now. They opened the walls, tore up the floor. Nothing. And still the knocks came. One morning, Mary woke up and refused to eat. That afternoon, she fainted. When she came to, her voice was different, calmer. She introduced herself as Lurancy said she didn't know this house. Kept asking where her parents were. When her father said she was home, she shook her head. No, she said. My house has green curtains. There's a red bird cage in the window. She began writing in cursive. Perfect penmanship. Her mother watched and shocked Mary had never learned script. Recalled private memories no outsider could have known. The secret place in the woods where she once carved her initials into a tree. The way her father smelled like cedar and smoke. The writing said, Mary is resting. They tried to pray, but Mary wouldn't sit still. She sat in corners, twisting her fingers together, murmuring names they'd never said aloud. When asked who Mary Roff was, the girl smiled and said she used to live here, but not in this house. In me, she was neither. That name meant something. 15 years earlier, a girl named Mary Roff had lived in Watseka. Same age, same pale hair, same oddness, of hands that reached through the walls when the lanterns went out. She, too, had spoken to shadows. She, too, had screamed at night. And she, too, had died too young. Seizures, they'd said. Bye. The stories had always hinted at more. Mary Roff had told people someone lived inside her. B. That the walls of her house moved when no one looked. Papa. That her dreams were memories of another life. Her parents, distraught and desperate, had buried her under a weeping willow behind the chapel on 5th Street. And now this new Mary, this Lurancy, was whispering her name. Bay. The Vennums were terrified. Boom. Mary Roff's parents, now older, hollowed by time, heard of the strange girl and came to visit. When they arrived, the change in Mary was instant. She ran to them, arms wide, called them Mama and Papa, knew the names of their dead children. She described the chipped porcelain doll Mary Roff had kept hidden beneath a floorboard. The Roths wept. Hope she's come back to us, they said. The Vennums allowed her to go live with them just for a week. She stayed for 3 months. During that time, Mary spoke in several voices. Sometimes she said she was Mary Roff. Other times, she began speaking in tongues low, buzzing languages no one could identify. She spoke of dark things, of the man with the broken face who waited in the mirror. Of the whispers that came from under the floorboards at night. She said she remembered dying, that she remembered the cold, that she saw herself from above, her mother sobbing as she was lowered into the ground. And then nothing. A hallway of mirrors, endless, each showing a different version of her. Some crying, some screaming, some staring blankly with mouths open far too wide. By one jest, one smiled and beckoned. That was the one who stayed. Late one night, the Roths heard her sobbing in the guest room. When they entered, she was on the floor, curled in a ball, nails digging into her arms. She's trying to come back, she said. Bye. Something else is with her. Something darker. Something that wears her face but isn't her. She stopped sleeping. She stood at windows with her head tilted, mouthing things no one could hear. She scratched symbols into her bedposts, into her skin. One morning, she pointed to the cellar door and said, "That's where she waits." The Roths had no cellar, only a trapdoor to an old coal room, long since sealed. When they opened it, the stench was unbearable mold, rust, and something sweet and rotting. Her hands twitched in her sleep. She began to say things like, "The others are coming. The ones who never left. Inside." They found claw marks on the walls, deep, fresh, and a single braid of blonde hair nailed to the beam. After that, Mary began to fade. Her eyes grew hollow. She told the Roths goodbye, said, "She's going back, but I can't go with her. I'm not allowed." The next morning, she was Mary Vennum again, crying, confused, no memory of the last 3 months. She never spoke of it again, but at night, her mother would still hear her whispering. In voices that didn't belong to her. They moved a year later, left Watseka behind, by the story spread. They called it a miracle, a possession, proof of the afterlife, but the Roth house was never sold. It still sits at the end of a cracked street, windows boarded, wind chimes broken, ivy curled like claws around the porch. And some nights, they say you can still hear it. The girl who wasn't there, talking to someone who isn't here,